Before we begin, if you're like a real big actual fan of this channel, be sure to stay till the end, because there's a bit of a channel future update thing there. If you're just here for the video, enjoy.
Ghidorah and Godzilla are both headed that way now, but we haven't been able to pinpoint the exact location without the missing piece of the Orca signal.
I've got the missing piece.
It's Godzilla, right? I mean, I know we already tried.
Not Godzilla. It's us.
What do you mean, us?
Despite seemingly increasing audience interest in the new Monsterverse franchise, Godzilla King of the Monsters turned out to be yet another flop devoured by the year 2019. And this time I'd say it's actually quite a bummer to hear, because for all these creature movies that feature a human side and a non-human monster side, Godzilla 2 is the perfect example of how they should be constructed, visually as well as narratively. When I say visually, I obviously mean the fact that this film looks pretty great. I mean, it looks downright incredible. But to be honest, even though the visual side is very impressive, it doesn't really carry the same massive impact as it would have some years ago. I think we're at a point now technologically where any studio with millions of dollars to spend is able to create these breathtaking CGI shots. I don't mean to take anything away from what this film did visually, but I wouldn't go as far as to call it anything brand new that would make it stand out. However, the reason I do think this movie does stand out is due to the way it handles itself narratively, how it somehow manages to seamlessly connect the human element with the monster element in a way that clearly showcases that they're not that different. The common problem that usually happens in all monster movies like Godzilla goes like this. We have our human side of heroes and villains, and then we also have our non-human side of heroes and villains, be that ancient titans or transformers or dinosaurs or whatever. And these two sides are left completely separate and unconnected. Basically, the movies are only ever truly about one or the other. Just like in the first Godzilla, the story is mostly about the humans, whereas Godzilla is just kinda there in the background. And based on the fact that the new director here apparently is a massive Godzilla fanboy, it was very likely that this movie would in turn focus exclusively on the monsters and leave out the human side. But strangely, perhaps because the director was working with a co-writer who doesn't seem to care about monsters as much as he does about the human characters, this movie somehow managed to find the piece that most other movies like it are missing.
What do you mean, us?
Emma combined the bioacoustics of Godzilla with a human.
And with that said, let's look at Godzilla King of the Monsters and how exactly it manages to connect the human side to the monster side in a way that makes this film one unified entity. How a movie about monsters and men became a movie about monsters and non-monsters. The very central reason why Godzilla 2 stands out as an interconnected monster blockbuster is all thanks to the way it handles the meaning of its title, how it's meant less as a face value description and more as an overarching theme. And for any of you who haven't heard me talk about this before, theme is perhaps the quickest way to see if a story was made by filmmakers who put in any real effort whatsoever. To be blunt, I wasn't exactly the biggest fan of the first Godzilla movie, but back when I saw the initial trailer for the sequel, I already knew I would be. Not based on any of the visuals, but instead on just one short exchange of dialogue.
You're a monster. I'm sorry.
Basically, the theme and the whole point of this movie is that all these different gigantic monsters come out of the shadows and bring along an endless amount of death and destruction. And if this was your average blockbuster, that's all it would be. But the genius of Godzilla King of the Monsters is that it also applies this mentality to the human side. As in, here the term monster doesn't mean just these massive ancient titans. Here, monsters also come in human form. Look at the main villain Alan Jonah, and you'll quickly notice that he basically is the human equivalent of the main Titan villain, Ghidorah. He's an uncaring, ruthless beast who brings chaos and ruin everywhere he goes. Look at the government. All they wanna do throughout this movie is destroy all the Titans. And the first chance they get, what do?
An oxygen destroyer.
designed to exterminate all life forms within a 2-mile radius.
I mean, look at the human race as a whole. The main gist of the story is that we as a species are ruining the planet and taking it toward its inevitable destruction. But the very best instance of the monster theme has to be Vera Farmiga's character, Dr. Emma Russell. On the outside, she seems to be the furthest thing from a monster as anything can be. She's a loving mother whose only desire is to do good. But nonetheless, she is affected by the loss of her other child so much that even she is driven into horrible acts of destruction.
All because deep down inside, she actually just wants to awaken and use the evil Titans to take revenge on Godzilla for killing her son.
She joins forces with Jonah and gets her colleagues killed in the process. She unleashes Ghidorah and gets a bunch more people killed on the spot, and even more later on. Essentially, she is living proof that even the leastest of physical monsters are capable of committing the biggest acts of monstrous evil.
I'm sorry.
The reason this is also crucial is because it unites everything in this movie under the same theme of monsters. Just like that, a movie about only ancient titans becomes as much of a movie about humanity. But even though the film is about monsters, it's also as much about the opposite. On the Titan side, we have Godzilla fighting for peace. We have Mothra, who basically represents the good qualities of purity and beauty, like when she sacrifices herself to save Godzilla. And on the human side, once again, it's the exact same thing. We have Saito giving up his own life to give Godzilla a fighting chance to save the Earth. We have Madison putting herself in danger in order to stop the Titans from destroying everything. I mean, we even have Emma again, because in many ways she is the human equivalent of Mothra. At first, we think of her as this big monster representing only gruesome destruction, but then at the end we finally see her for the kind, benevolent soul she truly is, when she sacrifices herself in a moment that is the exact reverse of the earlier moment that first painted her as a monster.
Emma, let's go! Come on!
Both Titans and humans are capable of being evil monsters, but at the same time, both Titans and humans are also capable of being the opposite. And that's what this entire movie is about. In addition to just overarching theme, this movie also creates a unified connection between Titans and humans in a more detailed way through plot. The problem that usually occurs in monster movies like this plot-wise is the lack of uniting all-encompassing goals and objectives. Basically, the problem is a case of either or. Either only the human characters have proper goals that they're actively chasing while the creatures are just kinda there. Or then it's the creatures with the goals and the humans are just along for the ride. Or if by chance they both do have their own goals, then those goals have absolutely nothing to do with each other and the result is a lackluster mess. If I remember correctly, I believe this was an issue in the first Godzilla, for example. At first, it was the human heroes actively pushing the plot while Godzilla was just distant background noise. But then at the end, the human heroes ultimately just ended up reactively following the Titans around wherever they went, which made the human side of the plot feel very uninspired and boring. You know, because reactive and passive characters aren't usually very interesting.
Alright, heads up, we've got new destination, new orders, let's get geared up.
Hey, Tech Sergeant, what's the word?
Another one of those things popped up in Nevada, sir.
Okay, I'll be right there.
But whatever plot problems the first Godzilla movie might have had, the sequel clearly seems to have learned a thing or two from them. Even though there are two sets of characters, there is only ever one set of goals. At the beginning, the human hero goal is to get the Orca device before Emma and Jonah can use it to awaken Ghidorah. And as for the Titan hero goal for Godzilla, he has to get to Ghidorah to stop him before he can be awoken. Even though these two goals vary in minor detail, essentially they're the same thing. Same destination, same ultimate objective. But they are still two different goals actively pursued by the two different parties. This time, neither party is just reactively following the other. Same with the villain goal. For Jonah and his men, the main objective is to awaken all the sleeping Titans so that they can take over the Earth and restore it to what it used to be. And what is the objective for Ghidorah? To awaken all the Titans to take over the Earth and restore it to what it used to be. Again, the minor details can vary a bit, but essentially both villain parties are pushing the exact same overall villain plot. And toward the end, Jonah even ultimately fully conforms to the mentality that Ghidorah represents.
He is using them to destroy it. This isn't coexistence. This is extinction.
Listen, we've been fighting for decades in one dirty war after another. I've seen human nature firsthand, and I'm here to tell you that it doesn't get any better. Man does not control the laws of nature. And neither do you.
For the final third act battle, our hero goals also fully align in the same way. Godzilla has to defeat Ghidorah. Mark Russell and his team have to go save Madison and use the orca she has to help Godzilla defeat Ghidorah. As in, this time both our hero parties are working to push the same hero plot, instead of the other just watching from the sidelines. And I think that's why the final here is much more powerful than the final in the first Godzilla could ever be.
Godzilla will bring balance.
Oh, I get it. Well, Serizawa let him fight action. I used to love it when he said that.
No, this time we join the fight.
The only gripe I have with this final battle is the fact that the movie leaves Jonah out of it altogether to use him for shameless sequel bait.
We'll take it.
To put it plainly, shouldn't we have a league of our own?
Instead, he should have been there to represent the human side of the villain plot. As Ghidorah is fighting Godzilla, he would be there holding Madison as hostage and fighting Mark in order to stop him from using the orca. This way, we could have had the same battle of hero versus villain, but done on two different layers, which at least for me would have been a step up. But even as is, I think the final and the movie as a whole works just great. All the parties are actively pushing the plot with their own goals, which makes each of them feel interesting and compelling. But at the same time, those goals are all still similar and aligned enough for the overall result to feel coherent and united. Building on the previous point, the thing that makes Godzilla 2 more absorbing and impactful than most other similar movies in general is the very efficient way it manages to divide all of its different human and Titan characters into very comprehensible sides of good and evil. See, the usual issue that big creature movies face is that you essentially have two different sets of heroes and villains, which means that you might very easily end up with 4 different teams. And if you've seen my video on Mortal Engines, you already know that's a big no-no. Because in essence, in order to achieve maximum audience investment and to avoid lackluster emotions, all movies should feature just 2 primary sides of characters. The side to root for and the side to root against. No more, no less. Of course there can be exceptions, but even in those rare cases you might still find that they aren't really exceptions at all. And that is the mindset that this movie follows. Basically, all the main human and Titan characters in this movie can be divided into just 2 sides. The protagonist side of balance and the antagonist side of destruction. The balance side is all about stopping the death and destruction by letting humans and Titans live in harmony. And the characters it's made up of are our heroes, Godzilla as well as Mark Russell and the rest of the Monarch team. Yes, people like Mark might not initially want to pursue balance between the 2 species, but that doesn't matter. Whether he liked it or not, he and Godzilla are always playing for the same team.
Hold your fire. We don't know he'll attack.
Well, he will if you keep those guns on him. I want him dead more than anybody, but unless this is a fight that you know that you can win, for God's sake, stand down.
The destruction side, on the other hand, is primarily about wiping out humanity in order to let the Titans restore the Earth back to what it was. Here, the characters are the villains, Ghidorah as well as Jonah and his men. Again, Jonah might not initially seek to wipe out all of humanity, but that is the result he's always pushing forward. And like I said before, he ultimately just goes with it.
This isn't the world that we wanted.
I seem to remember you telling me that the world always belonged to them. Maybe it is time we gave it back.
Of course, then we also have a bunch of other characters like Emma and Madison, as well as the government and all the Titans who move from one side to the other during the movie, which is also part of great filmmaking. But just to keep this example simple, let's focus on the constants. Like I touched on earlier, what this movie does is unite different characters into one. Godzilla and Mark become the same protagonistic force, whereas Ghidorah and Jonah become the same antagonistic force, just on different layers. As in, when we root for Mark, when we root for Godzilla, all that invested emotion builds together toward the same team and purpose, which will always be more powerful than, say, if Godzilla and Mark were on separate hero teams and you wanna root for Mark, but you can't really do that because his goals are at odds with Godzilla's and you don't wanna root against Godzilla, and so on so on. Obviously, there should always be conflict within these teams. There should always be friction among the characters, like is the case here. But you should always handle this in such a way that the audience can still support them both. And then at the end, when their differences are are finally set aside for a common cause, like when Mark forgives Godzilla and accepts balance between humans and Titans, that's how you build up to a powerful final where the audience is fully invested. And that said, if there is one key word to learn from this movie, it would have to be the word balance. Whereas most similar blockbusters focus fully either on the human element or the monster element, this is how you do both. You, for example, hire a director that's a monster fanboy and then a writer who doesn't care about monsters at all the way they do about human storytelling. And there you have your missing piece: balance. Alright, now that the others are gone, let's touch on that update thing. If you've been here for a while, you know that I've done these videos each and every week for like a year straight now. The only break I've had was when I took 3 weeks off on Christmas to write my master's thesis for my degree. Fun fact, the reason I started doing YouTube in the first place was because I needed audience behavior data for my thesis. But even after that, I kept on doing it because I'd started getting a real fan base and I also really enjoyed doing it. And don't worry, I have no plans of stopping. However, there is gonna be one change going forward. Recently, I accepted a full-time job on a TV show which is gonna last till the end of the year. And there's a couple effects that this has. Firstly, it'll obviously affect my time. But secondly, and more importantly, it's gonna require me to leave my tiny Krakosian town and move to a whole other place in the world. A place where the standard cost of living is astronomically higher. And the reason I'm telling you this is because it will strongly affect how I'll be able to spend the free time that I have at my disposal. See, as I'm sure you've heard elsewhere, YouTube as a creator platform is kinda unstable. Sometimes I've put a full week of work on a video and then YouTube suddenly decided that for whatever reason it's not suitable for advertising. Or then some studio came in to claim all the revenue from it because in it I said some not so positive things about their movie. And that's fine, that's all part of the YouTube game. But the problem is, it won't be fine in the place I'm going. See, in that place I simply no longer can afford to put my time on type of work that might give me no income in return whatsoever. I would love to, but it's just not viable. And that is why I finally caved in like most other film YouTubers and I created myself a Patreon. I've had loads of people ask me why I haven't done so before, and the reason is because I haven't really needed it. But I kinda do need it now, because what it essentially will do is give me some amount of security and justification in doing this YouTube thing. Even if there is a chance that the video itself will generate no revenue, it won't matter as much because I'll also have this other source of income for it. Don't get me wrong, I'll try to keep making videos no matter what, but this way I can be more justified in spending my time on YouTube over other extra work. And that's it. If you want to support the channel, there's a link to the Patreon below. I try to look at other people's pages to figure out some rewards that you guys might enjoy. So take a look, see if there's something that might interest you. And whatever happens, I'll try my best to keep giving you guys more quality content. Maybe it'll be once a month, maybe twice a month, we'll see. Alright, thanks very much for all the great support over this previous year, all you fellas and fellarettes, and I'll see you in the next upload.